Today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners, who for more than 25 years have successfully delivered interim and permanent leadership talent to transform businesses. To hire the talent you need to enable your business to thrive, visit www.progressotalent.com today. Andrea Hamilton is the BAFTA award-winning Managing Director of ModestTV. She spent a career commissioning, developing and producing some of Britain's best-loved entertainment and factual entertainment TV. She has been executive producer of Strictly Come Dancing, Strictly Christmas, The People's Strictly, and So You Think You Can Dance. She's created and produced the BBC One hit series Little Mix The Search, been series editor of The Voice, and creative consultant on Tumble and the Gary Barlow project Let It Shine. Prior to immersing herself in the best of the BBC's entertainment, she was the commissioning editor for entertainment and features at Sky One. So what is the story behind the story? Without further ado, let's get into it. Andrea Hamilton, good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello, hi. Delighted to have you as my guest here on the Extrology podcast this afternoon, and really looking forward to finding out as to just how you go about a career in TV and all that would entail. But before we, as is always the case with the Extrology podcast, before we go into that kind of detail, I'm keen to start from the early years, if you like. So tell us, where did you grow up? What was childhood like for you? What was home life like for you?
So childhood was growing up in quite a nice suburban setting. So it was a village outside Woking, and it was very much the 70s parenting model. So off you went for the day, and inform them that you might be back at 2, you might not, from quite young. I mean, I sort of remember being about 8 and walking what I realise now is about 2 miles, which I'd never let my daughter do. And sort of coming up to a riding school and calling this woman over and booking myself riding lessons for £1.25 an hour. Those were the days, eh? And walking back and informing my mum that's what I had done. And from that day onwards, I was this mad horse rider. And so I was probably 8 to 18. That's what I would do. And Dad would drop me off at age 10 around at the horses, at 6:30 in the morning, and you'd muck out and get 1 point. Once you had 10 points, you could get a free half-hour ride. That was sort of, that was, I suppose, how I spent it. So and it was nice. It was, living near sort of nature and woods. And I had a best friend that's still 40, whatever it is now, 44 years on, is still one of my absolute best friends. And we were together all the time. So, it was a pretty enjoyable childhood.
Fantastic. And who were the posters on the wall?
Posters on the wall were Wham!, Spandau Ballet. Is this how you suss out people's age?
No, not quite. But your wall would have been slightly different to mine, but we are very much of the similar era.
Yeah, that
same
kind of
era.
Ilk. Yes, yeah. So ABBA in the very early days when I was about 6, and then ponies. Yeah.
So, at what point did you first decide that the possibility of pursuing a TV career would be something that you would entertain?
So it was quite late. My degree was sort of business studies, and actually public relations and journalism was what I thought I was going to want to go into when you sort of are not really sure what you want to do at 18, 17 and you're deciding on your degree course. And I did that course, and it had lots of, Bournemouth, and it was lots of sort of business modules basically. So you did law, you did international journalism, you did, all IT, lots of sort of different business studies modules just with the one that you were sort of majoring in. And I went away travelling almost immediately after that 4-year degree because it included a year's in the workplace. And while I was travelling, I thought, I don't want to work in public relations or journalism. And I just had this sense that what I should be doing is television production. That's a really weird thing. And I can't sort of tell you where it came from. It was a real sort of instinctual, that's what I'm meant to be doing. That's more tangible. And I had this feeling that the sense of what I was about to go into, potentially as, at the start of my career, was not tangible enough. It's the only way I could describe it. It was too much making something out of nothing, having to fill pages, having to pretend that a product was more unique or innovative last week than it was this week. And I suddenly felt like it wasn't going to be tangible enough. So there's been a leap, I know, to then saying, well, you're going into television production.
Had you any kind of influential figures around that, with that sort of TV experience that you tapped into and you'd gotten to a sense of what
really.
that career could look right?
No, my father was a critic and was in finance, and my mum was an HR director eventually, but I'm not sure she was at that time. And she was sort of encouraging me in HR. And I thought, oh no, I don't want to do that. That's not quite creative enough for me. So I think I just sort of grabbed at the first thing that, I was the first person in my immediate family to go to university. So there wasn't any real, it's an odd thing. I can't quite actually put my finger on what it was that made me think television production is what I'm supposed to be doing. But that's what I've had this very strong feeling about. So, but I can't tell you, it came from something that somebody said, or it was just while I was traveling in Australia, I thought, I'm not meant to be doing what I've trained to do. I'm meant to be doing television production. Strange, isn't it? So when I got back, the first thing I did was probably I moved to London and wrote to, 150 companies, just doing desperate to get in as a sort of runner or production assistant. That's very much the entry level in television, is a runner. So I wrote to so many places, and I got offered managed to actually get an interview and got offered a job at a post-production company that were making sort of food shows with Joan Collins randomly, and also an MTV job. And I really wanted the MTV job, but the salary was so low. I think it was $5,000 per year. This is 1996, 6. And I couldned live at all, even with sort of a bit of parental help. I just couldn't live in London on £5,000 a year. I just couldn't pay the bills. So I ended up taking this other job and being in production, and it started there.
Any regrets? Do you when you look back now? We'll come on to how your career has evolved. But if you look back now, you don't regret. What would have happened had I taken that? I mean, particularly at that time, MTV would have been absolutely riding the crest of a wave, right?
Well, yeah, totally. And so I sort of quite quickly at that point, or it was at that point I did think, and then I went on to see in later years, it's definitely a sort of, I suppose, to a certain degree, people with privilege that can go into those very creative roles. And you realise how, when starting out, if you've got parents that can bankroll you completely, you can absolutely take I suppose even parents that lived in London at the time would have been helpful, so you could live at home. But, you can see how you can take those roles and take the really shiny jobs at those early days because, your parents are bankrolling you. So I could see how, when you now look at our industry, and there's a huge push now for diversity, and that's in terms of heritage, socioeconomic and disability. But you can sort of see how, that sort of private school element that people say exists very strongly in television can move through more easily, maybe. Not so much now, but I'd say definitely 25 years ago. So yeah, it would have been great to take that. But I mean, I did then sort of go back, and I was pitching and kind of connected with them in later years. But yeah, no regrets. No regrets.
And in terms of that first experience to which you refer, I mean, first and foremost, the journey to get you there, the drive that's required to write 150 letters. I would even have imagined maybe the majority of which might have been handwritten, or maybe even on a word processor. But, we live in a world today of immediacy of expectation. We click, even if you look at the job application process, you click a link, you click a button, you download a CV, off it goes. The thought of sitting in your desk in your bedroom at home or whatever, or at the kitchen table, writing 150 letters takes one, I think, to many, perhaps of a certain generation less so, but to a younger generation, maybe in itself incomprehensible. But you must have had such a belief that this is what I'm cut out to do. What was it that drove you to put pen to paper?
I think it's a sort of, what I've realised is, how sometimes you think, how have I done all right? Have I done relatively well in my career? And what I've realised is it is a drive to succeed, or if I set my mind to something, I'm going to achieve it. And there is no way that I'm not going to find some way, and I will find, dip up and over rocks and round and, do whatever I need to do. Be like water, I guess, to get to that point. And I decided that I don't know what it was actually. I can remember my mum won't thank me for this, but I do remember them, referring to what I'd said previously about the fact that it seems to be a general sort of privileged sector that might move through to get into those kinds of jobs, definitely, as I say, 25 years ago. And I can remember my mum saying, we don't know anyone in this industry. It's terribly difficult to get in. I think she almost looked at it like being an actress. And, you'll probably spend a lot of time out of work, and how are you possibly going to get into this industry? And I think I remember thinking, just don't tell me that I can't do this. I know I can do this. I will do this. And I'll not necessarily I'll show you, because I didn't feel the need to do that, but definitely there wasn't a chance that if it was not a chance, I would set my mind to something. There's not a chance that I'm not going to achieve it. There isn't. I don't allow, in a way, those doubts. Not really doubts, but the focus is clear. It's a bit Linford Christie tunnel vision, I guess.
But it comes back to what you said at the outset about, as an 8-year-old girl, looking across a stable yard or whatever and saying, right, I'm going to get myself a horse riding lesson. There was no question that wasn't what you were going to do. And I suspected at the time it felt perfectly natural to waltz up to somebody and say, right, Friday, 9 o'clock, I'll be here, whatever it might have been. So that it's that interesting around the whole nature nurture. And is that something that's an inherent trait with which you were born and it's just naturally evolved? Or, and for some people, I guess I speak with, there's a pivotal point, that there's a shift in dynamic that forces them perhaps down a path. It sounds like from what you're describing, it was always an inherent part of who you are.
Yeah, I think my mum says, so she said, well, you got to about 6 and you just sort of started bringing yourself up, really, as in I decided how it was going to be, and I quite confidently marched out and, made that happen, I guess, is what she's saying in that. So, yeah, it was an absolute determination that I would, if I wanted that to work, it would work.
And that first job to which you refer, making cookery programs with Joan Collins, my guess would be that in those early days in TV, you're literally making the tea. I mean, the job of the runner is, you are, whatever it is that is being asked of you to do, you go do. And is that right? How does it work?
Yeah, absolutely right. And in fact, mine, I thought I was sort of going to get lots of experience on shoots. But the production company I worked at didn't actually have that much going on. And one of the things they got me to do was actually, it's quite a salesy job of trying to sort of talk to salons and see if they wanted videos made, or corporate videos almost at one point. So it ended up not being what I wanted it to be. But they also had a post-production facility next door, and you were literally dog's body, run this tape. Don't need to run tapes anymore. At that time, it was run this tape from this side of town to that side of town, make the tea. And I remember getting told off that I didn't make the tea in quite the same way that the managing director wanted it made. So it's that's definitely what is expected of runners. But actually, I said to you, no regrets. There is something I just slightly regret, and I've just done a sort of session on this for people newly coming into television. But what I realise it's a really useful thing to do is to do your time at each level. And actually, what I do wish I'd done is stayed a runner for longer and looked at lots of different parts of the business and tried out. At that point, at entry level, you probably could have a look at even different genres. Factual, drama, entertainment. Whatever. I think I still would have ended up in entertainment, but certainly within, if you say even just within entertainment, you can go in and you could have sort of had a bit of a look at the studio floor and, so that side of it. Do you want to be a production designer and design the set, or be a camera person or a lighting person? Do you want to be a scriptwriter? Do you want to be a producer or a director? And actually what you realise runner is a really good place to have a look at everything, a real sort of 360-degree look, because once you start going up the levels, it's quite hierarchical TV. Once you start going up the ladder, it's more difficult, and people quite quickly pigeonhole you, like I do it to people, you're a casting AP, or you do reality, you're a reality casting person, great. All the jobs you're going to get from now on are going to be that, unless you say, no, I'm going to do this next. So I went up the scale really quickly in all my jobs. I really got promoted. I just went up the scale quickly. And actually, it's probably my major umbrella regret, is that I just wish I'd actually done a little bit longer in each level. And, some people I know now are much smarter. They've got, they're just smarter than the ones 15 years younger in a way. So they've looked at what I guess we've done, and they've looked and gone, right, well, I'm going to be a producer, I'm going to be a studio entertainment producer and sort of learn how to write a running order and a script for a show. I'm also going to be an edit producer and sit in an edit with an editor and put a story together on an edited. I might try and sort of do some directing and be a producer director where you go out and shoot. at producer level, whereas I took, every time I was sort of given the leg up, which was quite quickly in different places, I took it. Whereas now I think I'd get more under my belt at each level, and you catch up. But at certain levels, you can then feel you've probably got a little bit of a dearth of experience, or it just takes you longer to really get the 360. Whereas if you've been smarter about it and spent longer at each level, so not jumped up as quickly, not taken the title and the money, but learn your craft more.
Do you think, though, that's interesting, that, again, broad sweeping statement for which I'm now going to apologise, but in your 20s, oftentimes we're in such a hurry, aren't we? We don't quite understand that we've got years to accumulate this experience, and actually to get as much as we possibly can at a greater breadth, rather than just simply accelerating the ladders, is a wise thing to do. But we don't see it that way. We're in a rush, right? We're in a rush. We're ambitious. We're driven. We're hungry. If we don't get this done now, it's all going to be too late and we're doomed. So I think there is that sense, actually, when we're younger, that we don't have any time.
Yeah, and I think it's even worse. I think this generation are worse. I think what I call the instant grat generation, YouTube, everything's far. And I think, especially when you look around, I suppose it started with, I think some of the reality TV started this off. So, if you look back to sort of 20 years ago, and people that were literally sort of 1 minute working in a call centre or whatever, next minute winning Big Brother, and, kind of instantly snapping up contracts worth millions. Or, people that seemingly, I think 15, 20 years ago, weren't even necessarily that talented. And I guess that reality TV's got a lot to do with that, accumulating a lot and achieving a lot. And certainly in terms of what the public would see, it was sort of fame, money, opportunity, very quickly, without much talent. Because like I said, you could have last week been, anything, and certainly not at that level. With some of the reality, 22-year-old reality contestants. And I feel like that started the instant grat thing in a way, and that looking around at people that were, the Beckhams, people, they obviously got talent, but looking around at people that are very young with, a lot of talent, fame, money. And I think it, definitely kick-started that I must achieve thing. I mean, it might have been around my mum's generation, but I think it got exacerbated by, to a certain extent, TV and the popular culture that was out there, Heat magazine, all those things that came out around that time, around the time I started in TV. Making heroes of people that were, just standing in front of a camera and reading a script, but suddenly they were fame, money, everyone was interested in them, And I think that's put even more pressure on people. And I think that's passed down even further with sort of, the YouTubers, Generation TikTok, where again, there's people like your Charlie D'Amelio's and done a bit of a dance on TikTok and got 100 million followers. It's incredible. And, commanding fees of millions just to speak a brand's name, I imagine. And I think in a way that puts even more pressure on the people that are consuming that stuff 24/7 as well. I see it in my own kids who are 11 and 13. And I think, so I don't think it's going to get better, that need to quickly achieve, and I don't quite know. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because everybody achieve to a level that is impressive, so everyone, that's it, isn't it? And I know there's a whole thing, certainly about 10 years ago, there's a lot of discussion in lots of different industries. I know about a need for sort of people not wanting to do not wanting to do their time at each level, not wanting to be the runner, instantly wanting to be called the director, because that's a snazzy sounding title. And, again, I think it's become even more of a problem, people doing their time at each level.
Was there a sort of pivotal moment for you, the sort of big break? And if so, what was it? Where did it come? How did it come about? Where did it come about?
I suppose in television, big breaks to a certain extent are when you get onto something that's a brand and suddenly on your CV, people go, oh, she worked on that. So for me, I suppose the first one I worked on This Morning, which is when it was huge with Richard and Judy, and was being watched by millions. And that was my first sort of job, I think, as a AP, where I was like, oh, this is a big sort of, at the time, it was a super brand. And then I worked on Big Brother. So again, I suppose it's that moment that you think, oh, I'm actually, because initially I started on music shows and some of the smaller stuff. And then you're like, oh, I'm working on things that everybody's talking about and everybody knows. And then I think there was, probably from around 2009, 10, there was this sort of sudden super brand in TV, really, of which Strictly was one. So I suppose it was the point around 2011, 2012, I was executive producer of both Strictly Come Dancing and The Voice. Both of those were, at the beginning of being global super brands, really. sold to 60 countries. And so everybody knowing about them, everybody talking about them, everybody interested in them. And I suppose it's that moment where you go, oh, right, this is something quite interesting, because even my mum is proud of me. My mother-in-law's sort of telling me you're proud of me, because you're working on something like Strictly. So I suppose it's that was a pivotal moment of realising that actually I've got to a point where this is sort of looking like success, I suppose.
Do you think this morning was the break? Was that the point? If you think, the sliding doors moment, if you like, a left or a right, you could have. And how did you get there? How did you arrive on the set this morning?
To be honest, actually, it was probably much later. If there was a real pivotal moment, it probably was at the point where I was called to be the executive producer of The Voice, actually, because that was just been a massive hit in America. It was about to be needed to be a huge hit here. Everyone was talking about it. It was the first thing since the X Factor, and I think, years that had become a big global sensation. So to be honest, it was probably more The Voice and Strictly. I got those calls around the same time.
So what's the career path to executive producer for those that don't work in TV, perhaps who might even be considering a career in TV? What's the route, or the typical route, perhaps?
Yeah, there is a typical route. It's very hierarchical. And I think the reason it's hierarchical is because it's freelance, because it's an 80% freelance market. You have got to be able to come in, instantly pick up a job, pick up what that show is, know what the role of a researcher, AP, producer generally is, with the parameters within. Obviously it's different every show, but the parameters of that, and crack on with it, and just get on with it. And it might only be an 8-week contract. You've got beginning, middle and end, and you've got to have made an entire show. So the route is very much runners, so we would, I did a big thing called Little Mix of Search in the summer and the autumn. And, we had 20 runners on that on studio day. So you've got 200 people in the studio on a day like that and 20 runners. So there's amazing opportunities for people on those, if you want to get into entertainment, on those show days. And that's where I was saying to you before, you can get a look at the different areas, within television. Everyone sort of thinks it's all about producing and directing. There's a huge breadth of roles. But that does then go quite hierarchical in terms of being runner, researcher, assistant producer, series producer, and that's quite a big jump, that producer to series producer, because that's suddenly when you've sort of got the whole production underneath you, really. Then there can be a new sort of role that's somewhere between a series producer and an exec, so it's called a series editor, and then executive producer. So, and then offshoots probably by the time you get to executive producer level would be being a commissioning editor, or then sort of running a production company, being creative director or managing director of a production company. So that's the sort of production ladder, if you like.
So go back to The Voice. So you're to be executive producer of The Voice.
Yeah.
Do you remember how you felt when that was first communicated to you?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I can remember how that was communicated, but funnily enough, it was at the same time as it was also talked about that I would be executive producer of Strictly Come Dancing. So
at the same time?
Yeah, and it's because there'd been an exec producer on Strictly, and she was going to go across and do The Voice, but she couldn't start until the sort of live shows. And with The Voice, it was mainly about the turning, the first bit, the turning chairs and the battles, So I started it, and I started that, doing that side of it, the blinds and the battles. And then I swapped and became executive producer of Strictly, which was just starting up. And she came across and took over the lives of The Voice. So it was a conversation about both those brands, which was incredible. So yeah, the point where I got the call about Strictly as well, I remember thinking, that's weird, because I vaguely hung that on my line. And I don't think I ever sat down and went, right, this is my career plan. I don't know who does, but maybe some of the kids do these days. They're smarter, I think, about stuff like that. But I definitely didn't. And I just wanted to, I suppose, work on shows that I liked and thought were good and worthy and people were going to watch and, enjoy. But I do remember thinking, when I got the call about Strictly in particular, thinking, oh, that's interesting, because I did sort of about a year ago think, wouldn't it be brilliant? Imagine getting the call to exec Strictly. And I thought to myself, subconsciously I've hung that on my line. I almost see like you've got this sort of line in front of you. And so sometimes you subconsciously hang things on a line on your path, and you don't even maybe realise that you're then slightly subconsciously manoeuvring yourself in that direction. Even if you're not all out going for like, how do I get myself this job, which I never did have those thoughts. I just thought I've hung that there in the future as something I want to happen. And I just thought, something about me doing that has manifested this. That's sort of how I remember that's the feeling I had when I got the call about Strictly.
How far into the Strictly life cycle were we at that point? I'm trying to remember
So it started in 2004, and it was the sort of more old-fashioned looking come dancing set. That's where it came from.
Yeah.
And then I came in from when it became much more entertainment and went much more. I mean, it was still Bruce Forsyth presenting it. It was 2012.
Because it strikes me that one of the questions that I had, which I'd lead into, is kind of, is there I'm slightly jumping the gun here, but the sort of secret sauce, the magic ingredients when you look at a show and you think, actually, do you know what, we're onto something here. It struck me, if you go back to 2004, I'm guessing, again, trying to get my orders, my mind set back to that time, but we were starting to see a lot more, to your point, reality TV and those sorts of things coming into play. But the idea of variety around light entertainment, if I look back to my childhood, the only real dancing on TV would have been, as I recall, Strictly Come Dancing, or you might have seen, my grandparents were avid Morecambe and Wise fans. I remember sitting in their house on a Saturday tea time or Saturday evening watching Eric and Ernie. They might throw a little bit of dancing in at some point to the end, but to actually then build a whole show around dancing, which for a long time felt like something that perhaps an older generation might engage in, certainly wouldn't have been considered mainstream, and yet clearly is something that so many people have gotten involved in, and the show has been an enormous success. It strikes me it would have been a brave move, I would imagine, for somebody at the BBC at that time to sit down and go, right, we've got an idea for a show. We think it could be transformative. It arguably has, but it must. Is there a secret sauce? Do you look at these things as a producer and think, yeah, this is the one. This is really going to fly?
I don't think anybody ever really does that. I think occasionally you might, if you've done a pilot and everybody gets really excited about it, and everyone's sort of wide-eyed and fizzing about it, you think, oh God, we're on something here. Most of the time it's pot luck, I mean, even things like Big Brother, I think, those shows that everyone thinks, oh, did everybody know? Like, not really. Just someone's brave enough. A commissioner is brave enough to give it a go. And I do know a good story about that, actually. I do know that the BBC, the development team at the time, and someone called Karen Smith, who's brilliant, that I've known for a long time in the industry, was running the development team. And it's different, actually. It's quite a different skill set. You get a development team and you get production teams, and they're not necessarily the same people in TV. So the people that sit there coming up with ideas are then not necessarily the people that go on to make them. It's a different mindset and skill set, interestingly. But I know they had the meeting with the head of BBC One, I think, or the entertainment head at BBC One. And in order to help sell the idea, they got some Latin dancers in the middle of the meeting to come in and start dancing around the room in order to sort of, make a splash and convince them that this was something that, they should give it a go. So, that's one of the reasons I think that they went, okay, let's give this a go. But it's always, within instinct, experience, as much as you can. But mainly with those things, it's sort of, let's give this a go and see what happens. And you put everything into it, and you put out your first series, and you sort of wait and hope, really.
What did you enjoy about the Strictly experience?
I love the sort of, I suppose, the creativity of it. I know what I love the most. It was like the world building, and what you feel like you feel like people they can leave the week behind, and you're pulled into this. I suppose it is a world really of just colour and fabric whirling in front of your face, and dance, and people's you're sort of drawn in by the music and the love that people that are doing it have got, because they all get into it and love it so much because it's such a sort of constant serotonin buzz. So they're all just absolutely loving it. So then that becomes quite quickly bonded. So the celebrities are bonded, the dancers are bonded. It's generally a very positive vibe that comes out of that show, and genuinely it is a positive vibe. And the judges there was very little in terms of producing, in terms of it was true as to what it really is, whereas I went into it thinking, and I'd heard some of the stories about X Factor and seen, that there's a lot of producing goes on, and there's this and there's that to sort of slightly manipulate it and make it more tabloidy. And there just wasn't that with Strictly, really. And I think that's why it's stayed so true to itself that whatever it is now, 17 years on, it's still doing so well and still on TV, where some of those other brands are sort of taking a break.
Do you think it's because of that authenticity?
Yeah,
because to my
absolutely.
point, clearly I was going to say you can't make someone appear a better dancer. I guess there's an argument that says you can coach and train somebody to be a better dancer.
Absolutely,
but
yeah.
on a screen, you dance how you dance, right? So there isn't that sense you can't polish it in that respect.
No,
you can't make someone look better. And that authenticity resonates. It's very human.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think that comes through the celebrities, the dancers, the judges, very much so, is that, it is what it is. And people develop a real love for it. And it's that love and that sort of excitement and, and going out there. And I suppose for me, it was I just started at the time where we'd started building concepts around it. So in the early days, it really was just come dancing, and it was a set. And there was one colour or two colours and some outfits. Whereas what happened when we started there was it became much more about story, and it became much more about, creating an entire concept that this was going to be set in Paris, and the screens would be Paris, and the outfit would say that, and everything about the projection would be that, and the story was, the props would be there, and the colour and outfits and everything. So it was all elements that were sort of building the world. Like I said, I think those things that just sort of pull you in and the world. But I think what becomes, certainly in terms of BBC, and this might be quite a quintessentially British thing, is that when an audience like that, and I've seen it on Strictly, I've seen it on the One Show to a certain extent, and I think there are very few in certain brands that if an audience get in there early and they feel they're part of the success of growing that, they sort of feel like they own a piece of it, and then the loyalty is fierce. And I feel like that about Strictly. I felt like that older generation that probably felt that there wasn't much for them back then. I'm talking over 50s, but they're not exactly older, but that's probably over 55s maybe in the earlier days. They really felt for the first time something had come to as a big Saturday night razzle-dazzle show for them. And the kind of, I suppose there was a sense of sort of gratitude in that, and then a love for that show. And as I say, the loyalty it instills is just, that's the recipe for success.
And it strikes me, and this isn't based on any factual evidence, just anecdotally from what I hear and see and have experienced, but it strikes me that it transcends generations. So it will be, whole families would sit down from, your 5-year-old to your grandmother would sit in front of a screen on a Saturday evening and watch Strictly.
Yeah,
and
that's what it is.
Actually, captured, it's become woven into the nation's fabric. Arguably, is that something that you'd seen internationally as well? I would imagine that's not uniquely British. It transcends nations as much as it does generations. Yeah,
totally. I think it's sold to over 60 countries in the end, Strictly, and still going at many. It's called Dancing with the Stars in a lot of places. It's still going in the States and all over the world. But I think the dance, the struggle to learn that dance, the relationship between dancer and dancer, the music, the entertainment brought by the panel, all those things are, when thrown into the same pot. And there's a lot of joy, I think, in that show. There's a lot of positivity. No one was being put down. And if it was done in a sort of pantomime way. And, I suppose that's because it's sort of celeb to celeb in a way. If you take a, choreographer Hallward to, I don't know, Jerry Hall, whatever, there's a banter that they can get on a level with. So I think there's a purity and a positivity more in that than there is potentially in, obviously it was very successful for a long time, all the brilliant music shows that were on the other side, but I think where potentially in the end it fell out of favour slightly with the audiences were when, sort of the likes of Simon Cowell, who I think is brilliant by the way, but taking people down and talking to, there he was, multi-millionaire Simon, sort of putting down some 18-year-old who'd come and sort of sung their heart out. And I think in the end, that slightly, we went into a world of being a little bit more positive and touchy-feely. And I think that resonated with Strictly and a lot of the more woke generation. I'm not sure I like that word, but, the whole woke thing. I think it was out of kilter, let's say, that kind of mean thing that came with potentially some of the shows that haven't lasted the test of time like Strictly has.
I also think that we many of us, again, I'm full of those broad sweeping statements today, but we identify with the underdog in Strictly as well, in that regard. The fact that, there's the thing that struck me about Strictly is it connects with us on a human level that we all would acknowledge. It covers the range of talents, from the people who might consider, there's not one of us that at some point in our life hasn't had a dance, even if it's in the privacy of our own, our own bedroom. Completely. Whether or not other people have seen us do it, we all think we might. So you've got the people that think, goodness me, I'm born with 2 left feet or 2 right feet, versus the person who thinks, I've got some moves. I know I've got some moves. And actually we've all So I think therefore there's right the way through the Strictly journey, we can all identify with someone who's part of the show that go, yeah, I'm kind of a bit like that, or I think I think I could get there, or I'm that one. And even the one that really can't dance, then the audience ends up kind of, maybe that, again, not uniquely British, but we love an underdog, don't we? So
totally.
we'll look at the one that can't, and that also works. They don't all have to be superstars. The one that's just giving it a go.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll all get behind that person as well. And I think it's why it works.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because I think that sentiment of, whatever we do in life, even if you excel at one thing, you don't excel at everything. So we've all effectively been an underdog, haven't we? Whether it's like when you're in the cross-country team at school or, whatever, any area, you can either be brilliant at it if that's what you're good at, or you're an underdog. So again, you're right. It's sort of being able to feel like you understand how that feels. But I think that you raised a good point there about why I think some shows are successful, particularly successful. And I think it's that visceral nature of things that we understand and we've all had a go at. So Strictly, yes, we've all had a go at dancing, whether it's at a wedding or whether you're, I think it's a professional, we've all know how it feels to move your body. Same with singing, really. And it's why those two things really tend to be the same churn of subject matter that end up on those big shows that I know people complain about. Why don't you do something else other than singing and dancing? But there aren't that many subject matters actually that enough people can connect to, particularly for a Saturday night when it's very much about entertainment and performance and, that's what you go and do on a Saturday night. Wouldn't you go to a concert? We used to be able to do such things. So, I think that's one of the reasons. And the reason I really believe that, say, Bake Off is the phenomenal success that it is because we all know how it feels. Again, it's that visceral nature. We know how it feels to do that. And I've worked on shows like when I was a commissioning editor at Sky, I commissioned this thing called Project Catwalk, which was a spin-off of a very successful American brand called Project Runway. And it was basically Fashion Designer Idol. And it did very well with a certain ABC One, young, funky, Grazia reading audience. But you're never going to make that kind of show. And I'd say even the same with like sort of Sewing Bee or Great Pottery Throwdown or a lot of these competition formats, Makeup Idol, Glow Up, there's loads of it, isn't there? TV's just gone for it, take a subject matter and you make it a competition format. But the ones that really resonate on a huge scale and last the test of time are the ones where we understand how it feels, And so when you're, say, something like that Project Catwalk I mentioned, we don't know how it feels to be a designer. You don't know what it feels like to sit there and design a skirt. So when you then sort of watch the parade of skirts, let's say at the end of that show, I don't feel equipped to judge it in the same way that you would at something you've had a go with, and we all know the terrible, disastrous, minion cake we've probably made for our kids, as opposed to the incredible creations they're making. But again, it's still those same principles of having a go, underdog, want people that are brilliant, goes well some weeks, doesn't go well the other week. So it's still all those sort of life, the life stuff that we're all dealing with on a daily basis, I guess, is what it somehow scoops up in a format. But yeah, that visceral nature of things is big, I think, in terms of success.
So you won a BAFTA for your work with Strictly. Congratulations.
Yes,
yeah. But how did that feel? I guess, let me ask a different question. What does success mean to you? I guess because we look at measures of success in terms of a badge that it's afforded to someone, that strikes me as something, that's a huge accolade. It's a big deal. But what does success mean to you?
Well, I've got maybe an unusual take on all of that. So I think it's absolutely fantastic to be recognised by your peers, and that's very flattering, and that's a lovely thing. What I do slightly take umbrage with my own industry is I think, oh God, really, we've already got quite privileged lives. We do a really fantastic job. Do we really have to keep having all these award ceremonies where we pat ourselves on the back? And then because we're in TV, we film them and make people watch us patting ourselves on the back. And I honestly think, what are we doing? Not to say I haven't turned up and enjoyed the free wine and have some fun. But I honestly do think, why are we shouldn't, I don't think we need, I think we're already quite privileged, and I don't think we need to sort of keep patting ourselves. So, well, it's fine to do it, but I don't think we need to keep filming it and putting it on television for everyone else to watch us patting ourselves on the back. I don't really think that's what we should be doing. So I suppose success, for me, it's not, it's lovely for, to win those, if you get those awards, but it's definitely not something that I sort of have got my sights on. People joke sometimes about, oh, that'll be the BAFTA or things like that. And I just think, I don't even think like that to make that joke. I just doesn't even, so I suppose it's more, for me at this point, it's now creating a production company where we are we have developed, produced and put out formats that are, when it's entertainment, really entertaining for me, really helping people escape from the world, to sort of, just delve into something that they can switch off from everything else for an hour or whatever. And that you're really proud of something that you threw everything in creatively. And it was a successful format that people loved. That for me, and then it's, and if that goes on to sell around the world, that's where you make your money in television. So that's happy days. But that for me probably is what. And my husband will sort of say something about the lottery or buying a lottery ticket or something, and I think, I don't even want a lottery ticket, because I need to make this company work, and I need to earn my own money. I don't want to even always win the lottery. That's a weird thing to say, but because I need to sort of continue to use up this drive to make this company the success that I believe I can make it.
And this is Modest TV.
Yes, this is Modest TV.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you set up. Am I right in thinking you set up Modest TV in 2019 with Modest Management? Is that so? What was the inspiration, the story? Where did the idea stem from? And I guess too many questions in one. I apologize. Never a good premise, but nonetheless, I guess I'm interested to understand what from concept to launch, what the journey was to get Modest TV off the ground, and perhaps we can talk about how things have evolved from there.
Yeah. So basically, when I sort of been an exec producer for quite a few years on some of those big shows. And I turned down, I can remember my mother said, how could you sort of turn down execing Strictly? I said, because I feel like I've done it enough now that I've pushed all the content in, it's been successful, and I need to move on and do something else. And so what happened pre-Modest TV was I was approached by a company in China, quite a successful production company in China called 3C Media. And it wasn't I hadn't hung it on my line at all to start a production company. And they came to me, I think it's 2015, and said, would you like to start your own production company, that we would fund, and, you come up with formats. And I sort of said, no, I don't know. That's not what I wanted to know. I don't want to do that, I don't think. So I went away. My children were still quite little, and I thought that sounds like a heck of a lot of work, and perhaps something I'm not in the right place to do at the moment. And then they came back again and sort of said, are you sure? And it was around the time in television, around sort of getting 2015, 2016, lots of the big conglomerates, I suppose, in television, the big sort of distribution companies were starting to come to execs that had got to a certain level and saying, would you like to start your own production company? We'll get you started, and all those sort of deals that you make. And it was becoming a bit of a thing. So I remember thinking, and then suddenly the production in China became massive. So everyone was saying, oh my God, China's the next place. They're chucking money at people left, right and centre for formats. It's the big thing. They're eating it up. They've got The Voice. They've gone mad for The Voice. And, it's all happening. So I think I took about 5-6 months, and then I decided I'd say yes. And I thought, actually, maybe I will. I'll do this. I'll just give it a go. I'll just give it a go. And now I do look at that and think, that probably was stupid / brave, because I didn't have any experience at doing that. I just didn't have an experience, and I just thought, I'll do this. I'll give it a go. But the silly thing was that I didn't. What I should have done is gone to someone that had helped put the infrastructure in, because they were in China. Even though they were obviously funding it, I did absolutely everything, and I stupidly got sort of a really cheap office where I even had to bring the Wi-Fi in. And I had to do absolutely everything, buy every last paperclip, do everything to bring this company together. And then we were probably, really in entertainment, you need a good 2 years, if not 2.5 years, because it's all or nothing. So you've either got, pretty much nothing, or you've got the £10 million commission, which is what happened when we eventually got The Search in 2019. But you've got to work for a long time, and you're relentlessly working. It's a business of 99% no's. So you're sitting there in development, which when you're a producer, you don't really enjoy for development, because I hate the hours of talking about something that's probably never going to happen. So I'm really impatient and a real nightmare for development people. But we had a fairly small team. There's myself and a head of development and a development AP. And we were working away, and you go out there pitching your wares to ITV, to BBC, and my mistake, I think, was thinking, right, you go wide. So I'd done some daytime producing. I'd done some factual entertainment shows, like, the sort of, like I mentioned, the Project Catwalk, those kinds of shows. And I'd done entertainment. So I sort of came up with loads of different stuff and pitched into far too many places. But again, I had no one really to learn from. I hadn't really done that or even been out in a production company pitching away. So I was just literally making it up as I went along. So we just got to the point where things were starting to look quite good and potentially getting commissions. And the company that was funding me in China just stopped funding me. And I don't know what the scenario was and why it was. And I've got completely various sort of theories, but there was no warning. And so the money just stopped coming one month. So it was an amazing learning curve. And I just wouldn't. People said, oh, God, what a nightmare, because it cost me a lot of money. I didn't get paid for a long time and blah, blah, blah. But I wouldn't change it for the world, because I made loads of mistakes and got
What do you think you learned from that experience?
I learned that I learned the way to develop, and I learned the way that you don't pitch scattergun. Actually, I think I was too scared to think, right, I need 2 or 3 really big supporters here, and we should put all our attention into that. And those commissioners will be the ones that give us the work, because we completely build into the report all the time. And I didn't. I went out to about 15 different commissioners and, try to sort of please everybody. And actually then you're not really developing good enough relationships with anybody. So I learned to not scattergun it in that way. And I learned how to run a business. I learned, sort of profit and loss and all the things that when you're running around producing sort of things like Strictly, you've obviously got a team and you're managing a massive budget, but that's with a whole team that were doing that. I was doing absolutely everything. So in terms of what all the elements that need to be brought together to run a business, the hiring, the contract, all the legal stuff, just loads more contract stuff than I never would normally have done, because if you're in a bigger organisation, you've got those business affairs departments that deal with all that, so all those things where you normally have all these big departments. I'm sure anyone who starts a business would say this, that's it. It's you really. So you learn very quickly. And I learned as well that I allowed us to spend too long developing shows that didn't have enough of an interest from a broadcaster, so you just, I know now that you don't, if you go in and there's no interest, or they're not even going to throw you a little bit of money, even $5,000 or something to start developing something, they're probably not interested. So don't go away and spend loads of time working because they've shown a vague interest in this thing, because the chances of getting commissions are pretty slim. I mean, it is. Our business is literally, I'd say, a business of everything that gets developed and pitched to actually what makes it to air. It's between 95 and 97% no's.
But it's back to 150 letters.
Yeah.
Right, sitting down, penning 150 letters and knowing that you're going to get 149 or 148 no's. But actually that as a kind of precursor to your career to then go into an industry. I think the thing that strikes me, I can't remember the specific story, but the analogy of, kind of stopping 3 feet from gold.
Yes.
But that actually is there not that little nagging sense at the back of you that maybe, just maybe, this concept we've developed could fly? And actually the next conversation, you've got to have that. So you get caught between knowing at what point do you pull the plug, at what point do you say enough. That must be incredibly hard
it
to make that kind, even respectfully with the wealth of experience you enjoy within the industry, to know when to stop must of itself be very challenging.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of the time it's just sort of, it's because you're, in an ideal world, you want to be in a situation where you're ringing a commissioner up every 5 minutes and saying, what about this and what about this? And they do say, or just send me one line. Don't spend ages developing a PowerPoint and this, that, and the other. But that's not really the case. If you've got a meeting, there is an expectation of the way you present yourself. You go in with you might have cut a little sizzle tape, as they call them, a 1-minute thing to show kind of what this concept could be. And then someone's worked up a document, and then you've worked up lots of different format point ideas within that idea. And you sort of got to get to that point before you can even have a conversation. So,
well, I guess you've got to create some theatre around it.
Yeah.
Going back to your earlier point about the creation of Strictly, if you like, as a concept. If they hadn't have brought those dancers in the room and someone had just said, we're going to do a Saturday night dance show, it would have been obviously a lot more specific than that. But we're going to do a Saturday night dancing show. Get some dancers in a room, get people all the colour and the comes with that, and the theatre that comes with that, and the excitement of it. You create something.
Yeah.
So I can understand how that would be incredibly challenging when someone does say, "Just drop me a line."
I mean, the other thing that that I'd say I'd really learned was that what you realise is really it's all about talent. So it became more and more like that in terms of, especially when, the sort of Netflix and Amazon and all these other, Apple and all these other places now that are places that buy content, but they were a big competition for the terrestrials. It's a huge time of change in my industry in the last few years. And I think it was at that point that, you realise that if you haven't got big talent that can stand out on a billboard, on an EPG, on the Netflix, if it's a Netflix type that picture there of that talent that people want to know. And increasingly people will just throw the names into it, won't they? I noticed like sort of there's something that got 5 million viewers was because they called it Gordon, Gino and Fred's Adventures or whatever, and that's what they do. You've got to find a way now in this massive field of content, with YouTube and Instagram, all the social media, which is huge as well. So sort of a nice format that might have made it, years ago, like 10 years younger, or Super Nanny, for instance, 20 years ago, with talent that you don't know who they are. I don't know if that would have flown today. I think people would be like, no, who's the big celebrity talent? So it's all about, like we've got a production company, we own 50% with Ollie Murs. And, it focuses us to a certain extent when we're working on stuff for Ollie. But it's that Ollie's your key, really. Do they want a show with Ollie? Ollie's got, big fan base, is known by a lot of people. So he is a real calling card because people recognise him. They sort of know what he stands for. It's probably going to be entertaining, performance-based, And so just his face alone stands for that. So that's what I realised.
Is there a risk that the way the market has evolved is that rips some of the innovation out of the space, the creativity? Because I'm not suggesting that somebody like Ollie Murs doesn't have a lot of talent to offer the market, but actually equally there may well be a bright, shiny person somewhere with all the talent, all the capability, just not yet had the break.
Yeah, and totally.
Actually was going to take someone to be really brave and back them and let them fly. But the market doesn't support that anymore because you've got to have a big face on a billboard that everybody recognises.
Yeah, totally. There's been a big conversation, loads of conversation about that over the last sort of decade in my industry. And one of the big things has been BBC Three. So BBC Three was a huge place for breaking new talent. I mean, absolutely huge. List is massive. And that was the point that went online. I think it was 6-7 years ago now, to be a digital channel only. That was a big, big loss. But even in terms of, when we were, in the 20s or whatever, and you had things like T4 and you had all the MTV stuff and whatever, that was a real training ground for presenters, particularly in the live stuff that I do. And actually there is always this sentiment that when you've got a show or you've got a commission or new series or any series, and you have to say, right, who is presenting this, or where are we at, or you're developing something, who we're going to put as the presenter of this. The pool is quite small because there's only a certain amount of people that have got the level of experience they need, and that pool is sort of smaller and getting older. So then there was this sort of period where we were saying, well, are there all these YouTube stars who were coming through? We're probably talking more like 8-9 years ago now, to 7, 8, 9 years ago. Are they going to be the next big talent? But then there was this quite a big issue in television where lots of pilots were made, and maybe with some of the smaller channels like UK TV, and some of those people gave those people a chance. And then, the Zoellas of this world and those kinds of people. And then what you realise was that their presenting style of bedroom presenter effectively just wasn't big enough. And it was too everyday chat, not big enough, not starry enough, not shiny enough, not experienced and out there enough. And so that wasn't going to be a solution. The YouTube talent was probably not going to make the leap. And I don't even think I can think now of any YouTube talent that's made the leap to sort of having their own show. So
do you think that's the mechanism of delivery? Do you think we have an expectation that, I watch YouTube on my phone or my iPad as a smaller, but on a big screen, my expectation is big, glossy, high production content that kind of wows me in that respect.
Yeah, I think so.
It's more of an experience, arguably, in many ways.
Yeah, and I think it's the environment. So I think if you're just sort of in someone's background is their bedroom or their lounge, the expectation is it can all be very relaxed and chatty, and it's sort of just what you'd expect if you make the sitting around on your bed having a chat with you. But that vibe can't be what jumps into a studio environment when you're in a studio, exactly, and there's 10 cameras and there's an expectation of the level of your energy and your performance and your theatre and your everything else. Yeah, and I think the very relaxed bedroom vibe didn't translate in many cases.
Live TV must be enormously stressful. So how do you cope?
Yeah, it's the gallery. So the gallery, which is where there's all the cameras there, and you've got the director, the vision mixer, the commissioning editor, the exec, the series producer that's talking into the ear of the talent, has to be very calm. And even when potentially all is kicking off, or people are kind of, running about outside trying to sort things out, that has to be very calm, because that's the absolute kind of epicenter of what you're of running the show. And so there's a lot of adrenaline, and there's a lot of adrenaline on the day, and there's a lot of adrenaline that keeps everybody going on the day. And I suppose it's also a real the reason some of those big shows that are very good just keep getting better and better is because they just keep refining their processes. So, they've got everything down from the way the week works and what happens on a Monday morning, Monday afternoon, a Tuesday when the script read happens, when, the best writers, all those things are just sort of built up, and trust is built in, and best practice is built in, I suppose. So that actually they run like clockwork. They run like absolute clockwork. You've got 200 people, everybody knows their role. In a way, you could say you sort of you learn less on those shows in terms of the fact that you do probably just have your kind of your role, and you know what your role is. When I first went into TV and you work on a music show and there's 3 of you, I was doing everything from auto cue to sort of helping floor manage to script writing to I would go and do the off-camera interviews with Beyonce and Noel Gallagher and stuff, because we couldn't afford the presenter to go and do it, and I would be doing it, without my voice or me being seen on screen. So I learnt loads on those shows. Actually, whereas I looked at some of the team on that and their APs and producers on that, and I thought, God, you're actually doing less on this massive show, and your CV looks more impressive because of this massive show. But actually, you're doing less and learning less than I would have done on those shows when I was your age, that you wouldn't really you never remember the name of, So yeah, I've got slightly distracted myself saying that, but.
So how have you found the transition from the likes of Sky and BBC and the infrastructure and support and network that would afford you to then running your own company? Because I think that's an interesting, for many people perhaps who are, working for big corporate PLC right now and are thinking about, hey, I'm going to go off my own. The thought of not even having considered they might have to buy the paper clips and put the Wi-Fi in, that sort of journey, it's a big eye opener. We take for granted so much of the infrastructure and support we have around us. How have you found that transition from corporate world to your own shop?
Well, initially sort of, I say hard, because I made it particularly hard for myself. I think I could have probably found a halfway house in terms of someone that might have put some of that infrastructure in for you but I went for initially with the Chinese backer, everything. And so the things I found sort of harder were, like the sort of business affairs side of it, and thinking, have I got the best lawyer here? Like, is this okay? Have I got the right person? Because I haven't got anyone else to go to here to check that this contract is right and we're covered here. So in terms of just sort of, and opening a bank account, and going, well, do I go with Coots or do I go with these other people, or and so all those things that were the infrastructure stuff initially just took a lot of time. So I suppose what they did, if you're starting a business and you put yourself in a position where you've got to do all that, it does take your attention and time away from the core subject of whatever your business is. So yes, in the time that I would have spent doing all those things, finding accountants, opening bank accounts, ordering stationery, and doing legal stuff, that was time I wasn't spending, I guess, driving the team to come up with more ideas, or coming up with ideas myself, or spending time on the creativity of it. So it's sort of just being aware, I suppose, that that's the parameters of it, and setting your structure up, if you can, that at least then you've got somebody else who's fully on whatever your main subject matter is, which for me was at that time coming up with ideas that are sellable, and making sure you've got the structure to do that, or either that or you're working long hours. Work ridiculously long hours anyway. TV just is long hours. It always has been, probably, always will be. But I wouldn't change it. So there was no point where I'd think, because I had this sort of, I tell you what I did. I remember thinking, when shall I do this, and can I do this? And even when we landed our massive commission at the end of 2019, where we went from 2 of us to 40 of us in the space of a couple of weeks, I remember thinking, yes, you do have the infrastructure at BBC. Yes, you've got the public affairs, the business affairs department and legal and HR and what have you. But actually, I was thinking, even with Strictly, I started on day one. You open your phone to find your contacts. You hire your entire team, from the production manager probably to the accountant to producers, writers. You're doing all of that. And you're still generating and I was thinking, in-house, you've got your in-house lawyers and you've got your in-house finance people. And obviously you've got to go and find those people and find people you trust. And that can be hit and miss at first. But once you do, although you're this smaller setup, you're operating like one of those big companies, but you've got all the freedoms of not being within some of the structures of those big companies that actually drive you mad. And some of the hierarchy that I find very wasteful in terms of time, energy, all those things, particularly, I suppose, at the BBC, although I do love the BBC. I think it's a great institution. But I think I wouldn't change it.
So what do you hope to achieve with Modest TV?
I would like to be in a position where we've sort of developed, where we've got, let's say 3 or 4 big formats, big entertainment formats, perhaps one in entertainment and one in performance, there's a game show, a big, but those sort of big juggernauts, I suppose, that are the preserve of Saturday night telly on either BBC, ITV, Netflix. The big thing is, I spend increasingly a lot more of my time now pitching to the SVODs, as we call them, so Netflix and Amazon, and even sort of Disney Plus. I've had conversations with in the States. So it's building a company, I suppose, and my head it's 10 years, of which we're 2.5 years into it, maybe less, maybe it's 7, but where you have developed global formats that are worthy of those big Saturday night slots and those big shows that get the big budgets and therefore can be really exciting and thrilling and made properly on the likes of Netflix and Amazon.
So if you look back to, what advice would you give 21-year-old Andrea Hamilton?
I think I would do what I think I've touched on it at the start, but the biggest piece of advice would be to stay a little bit longer on each level, do a little bit longer on runner, have a look around at runner level, do 360 on each level, take more researcher jobs so that you get a bigger breadth across a more impressive list of shows, and you understand more about what is required of a researcher at each level and up to AP and producer. And I think once you get past producer level, it's definitely harder to then, or certainly series producer, make up any gaps that you might have missed. So if you'd really done your time more rather than always taking the jump up that you were given, you'd have felt more solid earlier on rather than sort of being slightly late and having to absorb stuff late.
So who or what inspires you?
People that inspire me are people that really are passionate about what they do. And that's probably such a classic answer. But I don't think it matters whether it's like, a new sort of, way a new armchair looks, or a new type of bread, or it doesn't matter sort of for me what it actually is. There's no kudos into having something that seems more loved by the public or more famous with, in terms of its standing. It's more people that absolutely love and will do complete 360 love of the thing that they're trying to make work, and they're really passionate about it. So even if it's not the subject matter, if it's not the thing they're selling, the actual process of selling, they love, so it doesn't have to be even, as I say, the basics of what you're selling. It can be the process of selling that you love, and that's what you love, and you're so passionate about that you're just really, really good at it, and you're committed, and you won't stop until you've made it a success. So I think it's those people that I find most inspiring.
Is there anyone particularly that stands out for you? I guess, who do you admire?
I admire Oprah Winfrey because I think she's been incredible in television. I think she comes from a good place. I think she's a good soul, and she's doing the right thing by a lot of them. I'm very sort of into, I love the book The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. So I'm way more impressed by, I'd be more excited about meeting Eckhart Tolle than I would about meeting Tom Cruise, to be honest. And it's people that are trying to sort of do the right thing by making the world, making the best place, a terrible way to put it, but just a force for good and a force for change, and that whole be the change you want to see thing that I think comes with, the likes of sort of, I suppose, Deepak Chopra, Eckhart Tolle, people like Oprah Winfrey. It's those people that it's the companies now that actually I see are, I'm really so delighted to see that there's companies that every, 10p from every sale goes to, a project in Cambodia, or water project for, the Sudan, or whatever it is. I think those things where companies are starting to get really savvy, and I really don't like the word woke because I think it's been used and turned back on people in quite a negative way.
It's always been used as an insult, hasn't it?
Exactly. The whole, I'm not sure that's not.
It's a derogatory term, and it ought not to be.
No, it ought not to be, because it was coming from the right place. And that's the problem.
I think these are people arguably who are enlightened.
Yeah.
We might say, rather than using woke as a term.
Yeah, and actually, exactly, and conscious. I'd sort of say conscious, actually, being conscious of the way you're behaving, the way you're treating people, what you're expecting people, and the impact you're having with what you're doing. Can you be slightly lighter on the planet and your resource with what you're doing, but plant more good? And it's people that are doing that, whether that's companies or whatever level. And I've got a really sort of positive feeling that the under 18s have got a very high proportion of people that are coming from a really good, conscious, light place. And I think they're going to save the world.
Fantastic. So where can we find you? People that want to reach out, people that want to know more about Modest TV, you're online, I guess. Where can they find out more?
So the website is modesttv.com. I mean, it's more business to business, I suppose, because we got a small niche market. But that's where we are. If we've ever got sort of jobs out there, we use something called the talent base to advertise jobs. We use something called people in TV who know people who work in TV. It's called on Facebook, and that's where loads of the sort of jobs go out. If you're looking for a start in TV, it's a really good place. But yeah, that's sort of the main entry points, I suppose, to the company.
Fantastic. Andrea, it's been a pleasure to speak with you. I've really enjoyed this. I think you have a fascinating story. It's a wonderful story, and I'm sure, I've no doubt there's a lot more to come. And I look forward to the next time I switch on a set and see those titles rolling and see something that you will have been involved in. I know I will have been royally entertained, as will, I've no doubt, many members of my household. So really appreciate you taking the time out to come and speak with me this afternoon. And I wish you every success with Modest TV and everything that you've got going on. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to today's Extrology podcast. I really appreciate your audience and ears. If you've enjoyed it, then why not hop onto iTunes and give us a review? I'd really appreciate anything that you might have to say. Any feedback always gratefully received, and look forward to hosting you next time. See you soon. Just a reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners. Visit www.progressotalent.com today for more information.